All right, so I'm going to actually talk to you about the Watchmen. I was looking around, but it looks like a lot of the Watchmen videos, after you get through all the media ones, they really just give everything away anyway because they're all analysis videos, right? So I don't want to do that to you. I really want you to experience the Watchmen. So I'm probably going to just change up some of what I had planned for the class. I might just change a project because I want you to read it and probably and or watch it because the motion comic is not the worst thing, and you might pick up more. I'll be honest with you. And I don't want you to miss some of the experience of what's going on. So I'm going to introduce you to the Watchmen and tell you everything I know about the Watchmen in this video. And the way that I was introduced to the Watchmen was this. So when I went to school, I learned about the Watchmen when I was my second year of college, right? And this is how he took because we had to read the Watchmen. So then how do we talk about it? This is from a magazine that is from 1980, what, five, I think? Because it's competition notwithstanding, the most eagerly awaited new comic title this summer may well be The Watchmen, written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Dave Gibbons. First mentioned in the 1985 Amazing Heroes preview issue as a series dealing with superheroes in a USA one step away from nuclear war, the scope is broadened into something far more than that. So the first issue would come out by now, right? So it's 1985, 1986 is the time. And everyone's eagerly anticipating this book because it's looking like it's very exciting. Let's talk about Alan Moore. Alan Moore can be described as a wizard, right? Alan Moore, he is not he's an artist, right? He is. Now, he's the writer of it, but he is such a moral, when it comes to the moral fiber of comics, he hates any of these adaptations. He hates he wrote V for Vendetta. He hates that movie. He even tried to watch it for a second. Nope. If you go look at the motion comic, he refused to let them put his name on it. His name is not in the Watchmen movie. He did not sign off on it. The original deal for this comic, as I told you in the past, was DC Comics had gobbled up Charlton Comics, right? So then they were going to do something with the Charlton characters. So he wrote this concept for Watchmen. They didn't want the characters to be murdered. They didn't want to betray those characters' fan bases. So what they did was they created characters that were very similar to those characters. I went over this in that earlier video. You should all remember. And that leads to just the freedom to tell this story of about superheroes, what it would really be like with superheroes. That's the concept of it. It's our universe all the way up until 1960, right? So when comics came out, some people were inspired by superheroes and they did put some costumes on. There's no superpowers up until 1960 because of the Atom, Dr. Manhattan, right? So the big blue guy, Dr. Manhattan. That is the first superpower being, and that changes the entire course of history. This magazine article is really all about the psychology. This is great because you're getting a nice young Alan Moore that's not jaded, not miserable. I believe he's retired from comics at this point because he just how they treated him. They were supposed to, the rights for these characters, because they created new characters, were supposed to go back to Dave Gibbons, the artist, and Alan Moore. But then because of loopholes and whatever, and because it did so well, DC screwed that over. It was to never be reprinted. They reprinted it, of course, a bunch, used all those reprints and trades tons of times. He hated that was happening in a way, but the fact is that at least the story's getting put out there. Then they decide that they approach him about movies, they approach him about cartoons. He gets approached never. No licensing, nothing. He would never allow any of it. That's why it wasn't allowed. And DC kind of had this code and agreement with him that they could not and would not go forward with that. Up until recently, where they finally were just like, to heck with it, because they need money. And the Watchmen was this just like, in case of emergency, break glass property that DC had. So they did, and that's where you get the Watchmen movie. Because the comic book movie craze was happening. So Watchmen the movie, which is very good, but it does change the ending. So if you think you saw Watchmen, because you might have seen the movie, it's different because it's a movie, so it's different. Alan Moore hates it, it's different, okay? He says, much like Bill Watterson with Calvin and Hobbes, yeah, if you want Calvin and Hobbes, it exists. Go read the comics. You don't need a cartoon of it. You go read the comics. You don't need dolls and things like that. You go read the comics. It exists. You could have Calvin all you want. It's in the comics. Alan Moore believes the same thing. So they were supposed to give him his rights back to these characters, but they did not, based on some whatever it is, okay? And they end up just merchandising the hell out of the Watchmen starting in like the early 2000s. And now, because again, comics waning again, the other video I was just talking to you about. They do the Crisis on Infinite Earths, then they do the some other Zero Hour, then they do the Identity Crisis, then they do there's the Flashpoint Paradox. That's the New 52, and now that universe is done, which I was surprised. I'm like, the New 52's done. I thought they figured it out. Nope. And now it's DC Rebirth, and that was the new version of Superman I was telling you about again, where now he did have his powers as a kid, but his parents are still alive. It's a mashup of now all of those. That comics event, if I can sum that up, DC Rebirth, is they go back to Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. It goes, oh no, it turns out all those crisis events, they're in a bigger crisis. So I'm going to go back to the 1986 crisis, you're going to go back to Identity Crisis, and you're going to go back to the New 52. So they all now went back to those restarting events. With this event, they're going to go to those events to restart the restarting of all the... Like, what? That's where we're at now. The multiverse, the mashups. That is modern times. I'm going to get to that in later videos like I'm talking about. Because right now, the innocence of this article is phenomenal. They did not know they're writing the #1 comic story of all time. Still to this day, basically. Absolutely. Stand alone, stand out. Absolutely. Now, here we are years later. And DC not only continued the Watchmen, okay? So they did before Watchmen was a series. So now they just did it before Watchmen. What was Rorschach doing before this book? What was it like when they were trying to do some adventures? Let's show those. Let's do a prequel to Watchmen with these characters, right? In some of the events that we've already seen in the world that's already built, okay? So we did that. Now we're going to continue the story. And now we got that HBO adventure. And apparently that was phenomenal, by the way. I still have to see it. And that's media now. Of course, he didn't want it. Alan Moore doesn't give a crap. Doesn't matter about it. Doesn't care. Didn't want new media. Didn't want that. Everyone was a little afraid when they announced a Watchmen series because but they just did the movie, and the movie is almost a carbon copy of the book. This is a sequel, and it's brilliant. I hear so many good things. It's very much dealing with race. It was timely when it was released. I think it's only like 6 episodes. It's not long, so I do have to watch it too. But that's a new way they've advanced this franchise, these characters, this universe, because the universe itself is a character when it's this big. And the next thing that happens after that is that then, we're doing the big mashup of mashups. Do you know what they conceived of for that? The way they conceived of this is Dr. Manhattan is a very powerful being. He's the only one with powers, and he's a godlike being, is Dr. Manhattan. Again, that blue guy. You maybe have seen this in various media, so you do know who Dr. Manhattan is. But if you do not know, he is a godlike being. Let's even just sum up. Dr. Manhattan, the most powerful of the Watchmen, is a blue-skinned man named Dr. Manhattan, christened after the Manhattan Project in order to evoke the power of the atom bomb. Right? He's the character around whom the whole world revolves, and his presence affects the lives of everyone. Okay, he gains extraordinary powers in an accident involving atomic physics, much like those Marvel heroes. And there you go. But he exists he can see the future, the present, and the past. He exists he's this omnipotence. So he's losing his humanity because you can't be that powerful and not look at people as ants. That's what it is. The same way that they use the example of superheroes are real, humanity would start to crumble because, he can just do that. What's the point of me trying? That is some of it. People won't believe in themselves. They see that no matter how much they achieve, that some beings will now just do this. They are the next evolution. That we would like them as much as a caveman would like the next Cro-Magnon man would like sapien, right? That was, I think, what it is. That's the point. So that's what Dr. Manhattan is. He's losing his humanity. He can teleport. He doesn't need air. He's just this being. And it's a lot of his perspective. The way rereading this, the way this book is, it's plot the story of Rorschach, plot the story of Dr. Manhattan, plot the comedian, okay? So that it's an interesting thing. So if in fact you do read it, or if and when you watch it, that is going to be something that now, notice perhaps that pattern, okay? The Watchmen also has some sub-stories in it that are a little weird and hard to deal with. One is this pirate story. That's a comic that a kid is reading because superhero comics failed, so pirate comics are popular because since superheroes exist, people's infatuation with them in this reality is... so now pirate comics exist, and you get to read this pirate adventure that has like a lesson that's matching some of the story in there. I think if you do read this, you don't have to read the pirate story. Like you can skip that part. Okay? There are these asides where there's this island, a mysterious island of artists and creators. You do got to read that. It seems boring, but it's important. The pirate story, not as much. Read it if you want, not as much. The way they did it in the film is they made a separate anime for it. I tried to watch it, the version where it's all in one. It's this 4-hour epic, boring thing. Very difficult. And again, you cannot watch the Watchmen movie as an example. It's either going to watch the motion comic or you're going to read the comic book. Gosh, should I have the... No, you can watch the motion comic. Again, it's 6 hours. You might read faster, all right? But watch that motion comic. That's going to be the assignment because the Watchmen is just kind of the assignment. I'll give you plenty of time to do some stuff. All right, and I'm going to scan all this magazine from 1985, 86, and you are going to read this because this is a good way to get introduced to the Watchmen beyond what I'm talking about from the guys creating it before the world ruins it and licenses it and markets it. So the thing about Dr. Manhattan, here's what the DC Universe does. They discover one day Batman's walking to reset the world and the Watchmen button, the famous smiley face, is in the Batcave. What? What is this? And we are going to discover, and spoiler alert, that the DC Universe is something that Dr. Manhattan created. He created the DC Universe. That's how powerful he is. Now, that doesn't mean anything here in the 1986 bits. He doesn't do that, okay? And this happens later. This is something they think of, 30 years later. Wouldn't it be cool if Dr. Manhattan did it? It was their way to bring these characters are now in the DC Comics universe, okay? So now they are just exactly what Alan Moore did not want it to be. And now they are just like superheroes when they were supposed to be. The view of what superheroes would really be like. The grounded vision, the real, there's consequences stories. People die and they're dead. These characters existed for 12 issues, the end, right? I told you about how they are archetypes of other characters. They're going to explain all of that in here. But you're in for a ride. This is a good experience. This will be great. Read this. Then you're going to watch and read the book or watch the motion comic. Don't skip it because, again, just sit back and enjoy it. It's 30 minutes. It's 30 minutes per chapter about, okay? And I'll send you the link for that. And that adds up to about 6 hours. So I'm going to give you plenty of time for this, but you don't want to put it off. You don't want to watch this 6 hours in one day because it's too much. All right? So I'll spread this project out. I'm going to change some what I was going to do for the next projects because that last week that I had planned is kind of unnecessary. I was more all about getting some of you hyped for if you wanted to do some of the business comics, but I really see that that's not, it doesn't fit here. You're not all looking to do that, so it's a waste of time. I'd rather talk about this. This is important. If anything, I might practically spend 2 weeks, in the modern age, steel age, really just kind of talk about it a little more. And then we're going to talk about those independent comics. So that's kind of how I want to do it. Watchmen is just phenomenal, and you should experience it. I experienced it. I remember reading this on the train, not being able to stop. Once you start reading this book, you're not able to stop. There is clues. I'll tell you the last thing he says in this magazine article. All right? And you're going to read this magazine article. And one last word from Alan Moore. The significance of the first panel of Book 1 of The Watchmen. The smiley badge in the gutter with blood over one eye. Here, I'll show it to you. There it is, right? Will be apparent after you've read that issue, but the full significance of that panel will not be wholly apparent until after you've read the last panel of Book 12. When you've read the last panel of the 12th book, you'll want to go back and start again. And the writer goes, sounds good to me. And a lot of people do and will forever. That's how good it is. Remember, this is the story that I said. Alan Moore told Dave Gibbons, this panel needs this, I want this, I want this. This panel, this. Practically a page of script for each panel of this book. Not just it is important that, okay, that's what the newspaper's going to say. This is what I want. They've got to have these bullets. I want bullets on the table. Make sure that there's that. All right? What's going on outside? I want you to know that it's this. Because, by the way, this world is, here's the difference. Since Dr. Manhattan shows up in 1960, President Nixon is on his 5th term in this world, okay? So everything is the same as our world up until about 1960, and then we have a superpower, and then one of the famous quotes from this is The superhuman exists, and he's an American. The big question about the Watchmen that they just blatantly say in the movie, and it's probably in the book, is whatever happened to the American dream? And then you're looking at it like it's disgusting, right? That's because people have different visions of what their goals were. So this is it's a very a tough world. It's a gritty world. You will understand everything I was talking about. It really puts into context Nixon post Watergate. In this, it alludes to the comedian covers up Watergate. Nixon does not get caught for Watergate, right? So this is a very, what if the regime never got caught? So they're bad. That they're doing. Their foreign policy, it's really like iron-fisted. It's crazy. And they're in such a Cold War situation, which we were, except it is dangerous. They'll tell you this. There's an analogy of the doomsday clock that we have because of the nuclear codes and nuclear stuff. As if we are 5 minutes away from doomsday, like it's the doomsday clock. In the Watchmen, it's 30 seconds. Like we're 30 seconds away from the end. So that is what this story is about. It is just excellent. It's got a great ending, build up, all of it, phenomenal characters that you don't have to know anything about beforehand, and it doesn't matter afterwards because that's it. It's the greatest comic story ever told. So you're going to watch it and or read it. I don't know which is better. Obviously, reading comics is probably better. If you do, read the book, read the book. If you're going to own a book, own this book. If you can borrow it, I know someone in your life has it. That's the reason I don't have it, is I lent it to someone. So reading the book is first and foremost. I can tell by some of your attitudes, you're just going to watch it because TV easier, right? So you are allowed, because I just want everyone to consume it. But if you are not done consuming it by the certain date, that is very disappointing because you have plenty of time to read this 12-issue comic. It'll probably work out to like, all right, you got to read about an issue a day. I'll try to give you enough time, right? So I'm going to go photocopy and scan this bad boy for you that I've carried for 20-something years, that a guy carried around and gave it to us. That is a magazine article from 1985 talking about, wow, I hope this thing's going to be good. Isn't that something? So that's a fun thing I get to share with you, right? Because most of those videos spoil it all for you and they give it all away. This is just something to read, and then read that book, all right? Read that book, and if you can't read the book, watch that show. And you got to sit there and watch it. Because the art's moving, it moves very poorly, but it's good. It's very simple. The music really adds to it, right? It works like an audio book, but it's visual. Don't sit there and be on your phone and be in different windows. You got to watch it. 30 minutes, all right? Each one is 30 minutes. I'm not going to give you like a full 2 weeks. You can get down more than a comic in a day, all right? But you're going to have time to do this, and then whatever the discussion questions are, they're going to be important because this is the most important book. That's the idea. I just want to get some thinking out of you. That's all I got. I need you to all to think, not just go, oh, let me go look up what the Watchmen meant, and I'll just copy it down. Because that's not it. This is so good that I want you to have it, like a gift, okay? The experience of reading the Watchmen. It's very, very good. Hopefully I haven't built it up too much, but it's damn good, obviously. Enough said. I'll leave it at that, okay? Watch The Watchmen secondarily, or read The Watchmen first and foremost. Read this above all else. You're going to read this above all else, then you're going to watch the next thing and read the next thing and or watch the next thing. So, because remember, is another thing you're going to learn, they're not the Watchmen. That's not like a team. That is what they actually, it's almost a slur against superheroes. Because it's who watches the Watchmen, right? Oh, if you're who watches over you. And that's the point. So there we have it. Watchmen is just phenomenal. I've obviously fanboyed about it enough. Alan Moore's fantastic. Maybe I send you a video about him to look at just so you really can understand all of this a bit more, because there's just something to it. And when I talk about meaning and intent, this book is pure intent. Every image, every choice, every word by this man who took it so seriously that anything they've done since then is just a bastardization in his eyes. So creator rights, man. It's something to think about all the time. It's shot. I really got to go look up how they actually went forward making toys and stuff eventually with this. I think it's because they made the movie toys. They couldn't make comic merchandise. But once that movie existed, it changed the context of the licensing. I think that is what it is. Diabolical. Corporations. They always just have to get that green. All right. Who watched The Watchmen? You're going to tell me. I can't wait to experience this.